I'm glad it asks. Here we are. Hello, my name is Shanae Trudeau. Thank you all so much for tuning in each month for these conversations. It really means a lot to us that you choose to spend your time and energy in this way, listening in. I'm here once again with Bhavani Maki for another conversation from the heart. Bhavani, it's just such a joy and an honor to be with you. It keeps me inspired and um, even through Zoom, I really feel like we're having a conversation.
And we actually are because, we're connected and it's real time. And I really appreciate um, the conversation that we're sharing ideas, we're bouncing ideas off of each other, and that kind of a relationship. And it's like always so exciting where these conversations go, the magic behind them. And I think we're having fun. Yeah.
I'm having fun.
I hope our listeners are too.
The feedback is yes, yes, overwhelmingly positive. And so, yeah, just a huge shout out to people who listen in to each of these episodes. It's really lovely to know that our voices are carrying through. So, thank you.
Yeah, the feedback is great too.
Yeah, yeah, we love that. So, one thing that you're really good at, Bhavani, is mining Patanjali's Yoga Sutra for gems of wisdom. You often in your class or even in our personal conversations, you go, "Oh, there's a sutra for that." And it's I feel like it's in your body. You carry a library of sutra wisdom. And I'd like to talk a little bit more about using the sutra in public yoga classes, in our asana class, and letting the sutra actually lead the practice.
Yes. Um, I think if we're going to do that, like you were talking about it needs to be in our body and it needs to be something that we have that we're really we've developed a deep interest in. And we know there's plenty of research that the more that you learn something, the deeper your interest becomes. And then also not keeping it in a vacuum. So, it's in the Yoga Sutras, and my teacher Rama said it so many times, you can't separate the yoga from the sutra. And it feels especially poignant and salient because what I see so much is as yoga has become commodified and it's become an industry, it seems like people are more interested in creating content. It's like I'm a content creator. Um, and without, we know about the importance of content and context. So, what's the context? Is it commodifying? Is it creating a library of online classes in which there really isn't interaction, where there really isn't conversation, where there really isn't connection? And as far as the sutra, like Patanjali doesn't have stock in yoga or yoga mats, he's not there looking to be lauded, right? Here we have a transmission that helps us to see beyond the contemporary presentation and agenda to something that is much more primal and authentic. Something that is tracing us back to this original impulse and desire that's been seated within us that brought us to yoga in the first place, not with it being about garnering students' attention or making passive income when we're on, vacation or paying the commercial rental bill, but it's actually an ongoing process of developing culture and civilization and personal responsibility and body schema. So, it's quite interesting because in my lifetime, and I mean, I've been really deeply interested in the sutra, deeply interested for about 30 years, and it required somebody who had had 30 years before me and had integrated them somatically, and also who had stepped out of a system. So, I've been really reflecting on this, and we've touched upon it quite a bit. My teacher Ramajati, she was instrumental in finding Mr. Iyengar and bringing her to the United States. And she studied with him. She became one of his star pupils. She was tasked with writing his teacher training program for what became the San Francisco Iyengar Institute, and was learning this aesthetic. I mean, there's so much good within, there's a lot there. But when we look at it, it really became boiled down to a certain aesthetic, in which there was right and wrong and, modeling perfection, etc. And she, said that she felt like she was dying inside, that she was being compressed by this context of a certain kind of yoga that became a brand name, etc. And she had to leave that and leave the community behind, because something was something alive, something wild, something uncommodified, something that can't be packaged or named, right? Was speaking through her, and she had to follow that with authenticity. And I remember her speaking about, the friction of teaching from what she knew to be alive and vital and really creative genius. So individual genius that was coming through her versus what the students' expectations and what their wants were. So, when we step off the beaten path in that way, I think we both can concur that the sutra have really validated what we're doing. And it's really hard when the collective current, the pashu, the herd, the cattle consciousness, the consensus is saying it's this. And with syntax, it's like the word yoga means something different. It's changed. But when we can go to these sutra and be like, you know what, that doesn't feel like, I don't have the energy for that anymore. I've done that. I've drilled it. It's taken me so far. Yes, I've learned a few things, but eventually we come to the pathless path. And this is what the sutra are speaking about. And it's Patanjali, he says, our biggest challenge is we constantly miss the point. So what I love about this is we just spent over a year on the Vibhuti-pada. And I'm like, what just happened? And I can hear my teacher say, you need to read it 10 times again and go. And it's not just reading it, but it's you get to a certain sphere and then it's wow, this is amazing. This is it. I get it, and then the sutra are but what about this? And sometimes it's too big or too much. I mean, I feel that way about so many of the Vibhuti-pada sutra, but it seeded something in me that I want to go and revisit. So having a literacy, and by literacy, I mean more than 3 sutra. I mean more than 5 sutra. What's happened is, in our deep conversations and explorations, is that we've developed a whole new lexicon, where it's oh, I know that word. Oh, I know that word. And we know the word, and there is no equivalent in English, but our field, our sense of the word gets bigger. So, I can just think back to even Sutra 117, which speaks about the different kinds of samadhi. There's the thinking about it and putting it in your body and ruminating and trying again and trial and error. And then there's come to your senses. What does it feel like? What is your body schema? How is your tone changing? Instead of trying to grasp knowledge, to expand your field, to expand your repertoire of expression and of how many ways you can do something. It's not a linear process. So, when we integrate it's always been a part of the yoga tradition is the svadhyaya. It doesn't
Mhm.
mean just observe yourself on a mat, just be physical. I mean, really, people
Yeah.
have diluted yoga into a physical expression, and they're missing out, and
Mhm.
that's what most people want. And a lot of yoga studios, they've had to get savvy and include all kinds of fitness classes so they can pay the bills and offer like a yoga class. But even then, it's like people run out for Shavasana. They don't want to contemplate, they just want to perform.
Mm.
With the Yoga Sutra, they invite us to become informed. They invite us to connect with our senses, to realize that um, our experience is valid. And it's something that's not always going to be corroborated by others. So, having like really taking it on. And I remember hearing a line, I can't remember where, but it's like, 5 minutes. If you don't have 5 minutes, you don't have a life. So spending a few minutes to contemplate, to really be like, oh, wow, what if I took that? Like, because the sutra don't really talk about the physical aspect, they talk about the proprioceptive, interoceptive um, aspects of our psyche. There's so many possibilities that open up to us. So yes, integrate them in, but also like commit yourself, you know, to deeper learning, to deeper inquiry. And it's so amazing because the Yoga Sutra, they're so multifaceted. So it's going to take, you're going to see, wow, he was a neuroscientist, he was a quantum psychologist, he was a dancer, he was a somatic educator, he was an Ayurvedic physician, he was a transpersonal psychologist. So then we start to, these ancient teachings, they're not in a time capsule, they're alive as a living science. And we're going to start to, create a brocade that really stimulates us. So, yeah, that tradition, having a teacher who's really um, committed to the indigenous teachings, to those strands, because again, they're not infiltrated by agendas, by likes, by followers, by conversions and monetizing, is going to really speak to our innate self, our timeless self. And that teacher, if they're doing a good job, they're going to get you questioning more. They're going to be like, what about this? They're going to bust you as far as like where you're getting stuck, or you're looking, you're, as Patanjali says, we tend to oversimplify things. So um, they're there to stimulate us. They're there to spark inquiry. They're there to get us to, instead of finding answers, questioning our answers. And it's really the most like how many traditions have intact indigenous shamanic teachings?
Mhm.
So people are doing this indigenous shamanic practice, but it's almost like an app, and it can't be reduced to an app. App means like it's probably short for application. An application isn't just like in the time that I have to, click play or whatever and play it 1.5 times, you can speed things up, but actually to apply it within yourself and within relationship, and within a class context, and then to take it home and see how it informs your because things get more complex when it's not just ourselves with ourselves. But, as Joseph Campbell says, it's life that authenticates our practice. So I think it's wonderful. I think it's an imperative. I know it's an imperative. And it's it's a lifelong study. It's a lifelong, not just study, but learning, because
Mhm.
there's so many layers to us and so many layers to these teachings. So, I could pick up the Panchadasi or the Bhagavad Gita or the Mahabharata, and I do at times, but I also don't need 100 or even two or even five different like pathways, because they're all connected. So it's kind of like that analogy of digging a deeper well and being able to source from source yourself.
Mhm.
What do you think, Shanae?
Well, to borrow your phrase, but really what is coming to heart to me, it's landing in my body, is when I went through your 300-hour yoga teacher training and you had us memorize the whole first chapter in order to, there was incentive at the end. It was like to get the credentials. Otherwise, I don't know if I would have done it. I'm not someone who memorizes things very easily. It took me like a whole year and a half to do it, but I did it. And it's still in my body. And and I've done that periodically throughout my life. There's been maybe a handful of times that I've memorized poems or teachings in some way because I know the utility for myself is it gets lodged somewhere inside of me and it can't be undone. Even if I don't, recollect right away every single word, it's in there and it's working on me. And I really appreciate what you said about, really learning and how learning is through the body. It's not just an intellectual process. It can't be, or else we won't retain any information. It has to be in the body. And that's just becoming so much more apparent to me. Yeah, I really appreciate also going through this third chapter. We sat with it for over a year. And um if so the Vibhuti for those that might not be so familiar, but it's usually called like the magical power chapter. And I remember sitting with you some years back and saying, like, really? Like, I don't know. I really had the question for myself as it often seemed like, um, it was like, why would there be ancient teachings on like just how to levitate? It didn't make sense in my body. And so I really wanted Bhavani's perspective of working through the body. Because again, I feel like that's something you do really well is because of your vast linguistic background, you have a different angle that me, I only know English, I know a little bit of French, but there's really something to be said for learning another language and then diving into these teachings. And like you were saying, it develops a new lexicon, but I also believe it develops a new brain pattern. So when you presented these sutra, it was like we often refer to it as ordinary magic, and that's a term from oh, what's his name?
Is it Trungpa?
John Wellwood.
Oh, John
John
Wellwood.
Wellwood, he coined the term ordinary magic, but that's how I felt sitting with this chapter. It was like, oh yeah, now I have to go find out for myself, sitting with a plant, sitting with a tree, just being in the nature and, or being with my son, he's 1.5 now, and letting it inform my life, like having these Sanskrit words come forth, but also it's the essence of it that you really capture. And so it was, yes, it is about magic, but not in the sense that magic is anything different than nature.
And I love what you were sharing about learning to chant it, because again, how do you get things into your body is it's a state of resonance. So you're actually building a resonance field. And even, learning like so many Americans only speak American, but actually being able to use different parts of your mouth and your brain, it's like you are actually in an enlightenment process because you're opening up new channels. And so many of these words, um, you'll see in my new manuscript, it's like I give all the different definitions of the Samskrita terms. There could be 20 for one word. So it's about, oh, I know that feeling, or what is that feeling, and getting curious about it so that these words, they automatically tap into your body language and your body wisdom. So it's and chanting can feel awkward, am I doing it right or whatever? But the fact that you're making these attempts has a real shift in the patterning. And it also, a lot of that, is like we're not necessarily looking for a new pattern, but just to interrupt the old pattern. It's not about trying to find the right way, but just getting out of, the karma chakra of the inertia where you're doing things the same way. So I love it like I think I've shared this before, but the practice is very it doesn't have the same vitality for me without the sutric inspiration behind it.
Mhm.
That's what really juices it. That's what really rewire isn't even the word that I want to use, but that's where, because if we even go into the mysticism, Patanjali says when you chant the sutra, my energy is with you. Like we might even start to see these light beings who are so filled with the enlightening process that they literally transcended their bodies, but they're still living entities of wisdom, and they're our allies. So when we're working with this with their medicine, they will actually come in and they will work with us, and that is extraordinary magic that we can access. I mean, ordinary magic, I think, is kind of the funny thing, isn't it? Right? Because it's so ordinary, but it's extraordinary, and we forget to see that. So it gets us to reconsider. And why repetition? Because we learn through repetition. But learning isn't confined to a recapitulation of stale axioms. It's like you're each time you're going there, it's like, oh, and now I'm seeing this, and oh, wait a minute, there's all of that. So our field continues to expand and our resonance field continues to expand. And again, we are, instead of it being personality worship, we're really tapped into something more ancient, something more enduring, something more timeless. Even the language of Sanskrit, though, when it was finally written down, was called Devanagari. It's a language of light. It's a language of vibration and of resonance. And it stirs something within us. It's a form of medicine. And
Mm.
sometimes we have to take medicine more than once, right? It becomes part of our, like, it's generative and it's nutritious.
Say more about that because I definitely feel I feel the same way. I feel like the sutra uh, are these you know to be kind of obtuse, but these threads of wisdom. But I feel the thread, pulling from eons, eons ago. Like I don't even have language because I don't know what happened so long ago. but the fact that they still land somewhere in my body, I mean, it really is a testament to you and your teaching ability to be able to use a common vernacular and, an updated language, so to speak, and be able to speak to something so true. But I feel like the wisdom of the sutra hold throughout the whole thing, no matter what we're doing with our bodies. You said this really, really great thing. I'm going to see if I can find it. I think I wrote it down, but about, the yoga was never only about, the what you can do with your body or something like this, but it's, the acrobatics of it. I'm paraphrasing, but about the somatic aspect, about feeling deeply. And it just lands so much better for me because I'm like, oh yeah, that's a hard sell. The feeling, the really feeling, right? And staying with what is, often, like you say, staying with what is, not what I want to have happen or what I think should have happen. But these teachings, are really profound, that they have stayed alive in, and it takes, I think, each generation, or each I don't even know, it takes my own person, my being, to really want to go there, to have interest, and then it comes alive for me. But I also know that I can't do it alone. Sorry, I'm trying to formulate a question. I'm just so excited.
You don't have to formulate a question.
Okay.
We can just talk because it's
Yeah,
wonderful and it's vital.
great.
Yeah, and so there's so much unwinding to do, because when we see yoga as like, it's funny, I just moved my whole library and I have an entire shelf of all these books on postures, and I was putting them up and I was giggling because I was like, I'm not interested.
Yeah.
Like, I've learned a ton of postures, and yeah, it was interesting, but we get stuck there. So when we're trying to reproduce yoga in a certain way, instead of using it to tap into our own innovations and our own genius, and actually add to the wealth of iterations, there's infinite iterations that are possible. We tend to want to get stuck in the words and get stuck in the idea and then recreate that situation. And that Patanjali actually says that's suffering. And what I see is a lot of people, Rama used to speak about this a lot, people who are not moving from their own wholeness. So then we do a class that's focused on groins, lengthening the groins, and which isn't a terrible thing, but instead of looking at the whole person. And I cannot tell you how many people in my community who are a little bit older than me who are getting hip replacements,
Yeah.
and who are really like, when I look at them, it's like, they have the yoga body or whatever that is, but they are not integrated and they are breaking down. So eventually they do have to sit and feel
Yeah.
and reconsider and reevaluate. Like, oh, like, one of my requisite things, if you wanted to graduate, my training was you had to do a 17-minute headstand. Is that really good for you?
Mm,
I don't know.
mm,
I don't actually know that it is. Um, because a lot of people are holding themselves up through sheer will, or they're just using their neck as a fulcrum, or it's like we become so we buy in to this idea of these things, but again, it's like nobody even mentions these postures in the ancients. It's more about tuning in with your physiology through your senses, tuning into your psychology. And first word in the second pada on practice, on how to practice. So first pada is like on reclaiming your wholeness, and the second one is how to get there. It says tapas. It's like you have to be in touch with your pain, and burning desire for something more primal and authentic. And I think a lot of what we're thinking as yoga as being primal and authentic is really in the last 100 years, it's not that primal. What is primal movement? And you and I have really gone into that deep dive because, first of all, you have an expert living with you. You
Yeah.
have a little, right? So just watching, I mean, my God, I could watch your son go into a squat and get up. Like that's levitation.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
levitates. When he goes down, it feels like it's up. And when he goes up, it feels like it's down. It's like he is not gravity bound in a linear way. He, it, small children embody themselves.
Yeah.
It's their nature. And then going back to that embryological development and, exploring how we evolved and understanding that we're still in that process, it becomes a dance with the mystical. Um, when we're trying to reproduce, we stave off our own genius that's
Mm.
flowing through us.
So, can I ask you about the second sutra of the first chapter, Yogas Chitta Vritti Nirodha? So, this, I feel like there's so much contention around this sutra, and part of me wants to go back to chapter one with this new, I mean, like my mind is being blown, but it's more like in such a good way that like my my conditioned thought patterns, right, of what yoga is or was are totally changing. And I too, I look at these shapes and go, oh no, I don't want to do that anymore. Okay, so back to the sutra. A lot of people say, oh, this sutra is exactly what yoga is. But I just wanted to throw it out there and see if you want to speak to it.
Well, I love this word nirota. We've spoken about this before. It's a state of dilation. It is an omnidirectional perspective in which we can see the whole. And what does the mind do? It vritti, it rotates, and it's not what's wrong about our mind. We will look at what a kid does. They circle something, they look at it from all perspectives, they do it again, because until we can understand the wholeness, we know we're only getting a sense of certain faces or certain dynamics or aspects. So, like, it's really, I love what Kofi Busia says. It's about having command, not mastery. I'm not big fan of that word. Okay, because it sounds like master servant to me. It carries that connotation. But having command over the vehicles of your consciousness and having command is a partnership, right? So even I'm not an equestrian, but from what I understand, it's like you become synergized in a resonant field with these vehicles and seeing that these vehicles, I mean, that's Vibhuti-pada. They have their own life, their own intelligence, their own um like their own current. So being able to navigate all these currents, not to get somewhere, but to work with them in a way where then you can decide, is this useful or not? And then when we go into the next sutras, which speaks about like our biggest challenge is like the vritti, what are these vrittis? Because we tend to cerebralize our experience, and
Yeah.
it's so much about embodiment. Just noticing how, and in the second pada, it says, what is ego? It's ego is built on uh, what we think we know and we think we own. So that's
Mhm.
what ego is. So it's like, oh, if I can put it into the right words or whatever, I know this ego aspect. So pramana, right knowledge, it really it's like it doesn't necessarily do anything for our soul or for our wholeness. So just because something's true doesn't mean it's relevant. So that if we turn back to the second sutra, it's like, is this useful or is this interference? Let me look at the bigger picture. Let me look at the larger experience. And also, we can get out of that tension of it being right or wrong. That brings us to the next sutra, which is about like, what is self? So I think we spoke about it in our last sutra class, that practice of who am I? It's not a question to be answered. It's a way of us to like get out of our mind's narrative, which then creates a script or creates some kind of a responsibility to uphold that narrative. And it's really of a way of just realizing that like, I am the experiencer, I am the seer, and letting yourself be interest driven. Yeah, to become an artist, right?
Yeah.
And art is not something that is frivolous. Art is necessary to life. It's our expression. It's the way that we contribute to creation and creativity.
I'm taking notes. That's so well said, so inspiring. I really, yeah, it feels like there's been a few times in my life when I first met you. We touched on this in the last podcast, but 10 years ago. It was at this time in my life where I needed to soften. And it was right when, and you were starting to make a shift. I think it was right before Ramajoti Vernon left her body, right before she died, and you are already making a shift to not doing, such rigorous practices. And a lot of people dropped off. And I was like, oh, this is for me. I want this. I need to be softer with myself, and I need space to do that. And it was great. And then right when I got pregnant and then had a baby, it was like 10 years later, it was like the next piece of softening. And it was like, oh, right, yoga isn't just the physical. It's a whole, oh, it's a whole other thing that's hard to be named, but we're slowly making the foray into that, and it's very exciting for me, and it just is so timely. And I want to ask you, a lot of this, I feel like in the ethos, there's a lot of worry that, technology is going to take over our lives. Technology being, mainly computers and, cell phones and, the internet and that kind of things. And I feel like it might still be a part of our lives, but really, we have bodies, and I don't ever foresee that it's going to go out of fashion to have a real body with at least, a certain subset of the population. I mean, who knows what's going to happen, but it's like what I keep getting from the sutra is like, keep it real, keep it earthy, it's yeah, it's like let the animal out in you. Belly on the
There you go.
ground. Yeah.
Keep it wild,
Yeah.
keep it wild, keep it authentic, and also let it be um not only an integration, but what's the word I want to use? An intermediary, so that it even becomes, it's like one part in the sutra, I remember it said it comes to the point where you start speaking about God without talking about God,
Mm.
right? So again, you're bringing in these resonance fields, and that's where like the whole experience of facilitating yoga and sharing yoga. I'm not really teaching yoga, I'm just sharing. Is I want to hear what other people have to say and what they're curious about, because that's alive, that's in life. You can't do that with an app. You can't do it unless there's actual contact and there's bouncing ideas off of each other and the curiosity that ensues. And it's a different kind of teaching where instead of like the teacher proselytizing, they allow for that banter. Um, it's so fun that way, isn't it? That's
So
when
fun.
relationships really start to grow. And, it just really makes me reflect back. Like I just feel so lucky for the relationship, that I had with Rama, and that I could bring her and share her with my community. And I wasn't always teaching what she taught, but I also had deep respect that she was onto something, and she was, you know, my elder. And I wanted to share her with the community, and the energy field that she brought in, it was profound. And oftentimes, she would get me questioning what I was doing, which was great. She really like was part of that continuity. And I mean, it's really challenging now because a lot of people, like, even if you do a workshop, people will sign up for one class. Or even, I think hosts are more like, well, why would I put all that energy into my teacher's classes when I could be promoting myself? Um, as far as like, it just, it, 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 it starts to span a different kind of continuity and intergenerational um, love that carries a different quality behind it.
Mm,
Yeah, I think it's really challenging when yoga becomes our economy. You know,
mhm,
it really is, and it's just become so commodified in so many ways. I just think back to, I remember our friend Mariana Kaplan telling us about, she interviewed a lot of spiritual mentors, and how there was one who said, this is what I need to live. So this is how much money I need. And if there's 10 of you, if you could split that, if there's 20 of you, you could split that, so that it's not like a panic kind of a thing. It's like you support, the teacher has the support they need. They don't need to have more than they need. They have just enough. And there can just be an ease around that relationship. So there's a lot of challenges involved. I was speaking to an old student of mine who's like, you know, student, but more of a friend. And she moved to Europe, and she was like, I was going to come visit, but everything costs 6 times the amount in the United States. So I think it's like people are really, we're living in if you're in the US, it's like there's a whole other world out there. We're under a lot of pressure that I don't think we even realize in our national, like, myopic perspective. There's so many pressures, right? Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, and I do. I feel like, every age is every era is a good era to find wisdom, and really embody that. And now is no different in terms of, I often find that when I feel spun out or when anxiety comes, it's back to the body and the breath. That's the place that I go. And then, I often pick up a book because that's where I get a lot of inspiration, is just, solace and wisdom through the ages, through the eras of, they hold true, and they hold true for a reason because they're time tested. It's not just, oh, the latest whatever for me. That doesn't fly anymore.
And I think we can do a lot like online. I mean, I was really surprised by that during the pandemic and teaching online. And I was like, wow, I mean, I actually can see where the decades of seeing, of learning
Mhm.
to see, I can see through the screen and give somebody feedback that's specific to them. And that's where the relationship aspect is really important, you
Mhm.
know. I mean, even as simple as like, helping people to see where they dig holes in their body, dig a hole to fill another hole. And where they're hypermobile and where they use it as scaffolding in their body and to get them curious about other parts of themselves. Obviously, when we're in physical proximity, there's also touch, which is really great. But somebody's in touch with their own body and who can really see and has one of the things I forgot to mention with Patanjali is he's a grammarian, so who can use the right language because words carry power. So if you can give somebody the right prompts and you have to be looking at them, and sometimes actually, depending on who you are and your skill level, you'll actually see better with your eyes closed. I know I see better with my eyes closed a lot of the times, but it took me a long time to get there. And they'll be able to see the response and see when something like, you can see because it's almost like there's a flush that comes into the person. Um, it's the contact aspect, the aliveness of the moment where
Mhm.
it's not saved and downloaded and then it becomes archived and then it becomes arcade. So yeah, we can use those tools, but it's it's the living conversation. It's the living like maybe it's the word is an application, but it's about penetration,
Mhm.
right? Where it's happening in real time in the moment. It's not, even the idea of applying something seems topical, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Ah, I love that. It's not an application, but a penetration. There you go.
But
I,
that's a weird word in these days,
it
right? Like
can be, it can be deeply, yeah, yeah, it gets weird, but don't
things
get
get
weird
weird.
with it. Deeply felt. Don't be
Yeah.
afraid to feel. Sometimes I think it's it might be a generational thing. It might be my generation. I can see it leaking over into the next generation, but to feel a little bit hopeless or pessimistic or nihilistic in terms of oh, the world has been ruined for us already, or oh, everything's going to hell in a handbasket kind of thing. And um, I used to be one of those people, but I would say it very flippantly and not actually mean it, but it was a way for me to deflect feeling, if you would, to really feel my responsibility, but not as a weight, as an opportunity. And I love that word. I think it's the word, uh, it's a Hawaiian word. Is it kuleana or something, which means it's your duty, it's your privilege
So
and your responsibility. Yeah. It's such a,
interestingly enough, I just heard it used by a Hawaiian as the context of being it's your burden.
ah,
So
yeah,
usually it's like, oh, it's your privilege, your right, your duty, your
yeah,
responsibility, and it's yours to carry.
yeah. But like birth, right? Like you bear a child, but there's a creative process in that too. Like, yeah, you carry the weight, but it's yours to do something with. Uh, and I know that for me, the sutra have opened up a lot of pathways to creativity and I just had an aha moment when you were talking earlier about when you invited Rama to come, Rama Jyoti Vernon to come, and that you weren't necessarily teaching the same things that she taught. And I was like, oh yeah, for me, like I don't have to teach the same thing my teachers are teaching. And that's so liberating and excellent. Although we can, learn. I can continue to learn from my teachers and I don't have to do exactly what they're doing. And I was like, oh, that's exciting. So that was an aha moment. But this sense of um, maybe there's some sutra wisdom for the next generation.
Thank you, because what you were saying, like, like something popped up, which was a sutra that's in my body lexicon, where you said like bearing forth. Okay. And so that sense of bearing forth, it's like you and I know the miracle of bearing a child. Like if it was up to us, it'd probably come out like with 20 legs and 16, it wouldn't be a functional, cohesive being, but it's like this incredible gift of life being seated within us that we're we're incubating. I mean, all of us are incubating, whether we know it or not, whether it's another individual entity or it's some kind of genius or wisdom that wants to be revealed. So it brings me to oh God, what sutra number is it? It's in do you know Ritambara Tatra Prajna? What sutra number? What
It's
one? Or
130, yeah, 140. It's up there.
yeah, it's in the like up like 6 or 7, something like that. And it speaks about we've been taken through so many layers at this point. Okay. Mind is being blown, can't understand this with your mind, but it's a place to begin because it gets you curious, right? If you don't gloss over it, this is in you. Get curious about it. It has to be experienced to be known to know what it is, because not everything can be relayed by words. You have, yoga is an empiric experience. It's through yourself, by yourself, that you come to know what this brilliance is, that is, we call the self. So you've gone through all of this, and then it says, and then Ritambara Tatra Prajna. Prajna being the innate wisdom. So it's not logos, which would be logic, which tends to be linear. It's losos, and we have the word to recognize. It's a recognition. It's a remembering, but in a way where it's not taking you back. It's like backwards, forwards in the present now. So you're awakening to the body of wisdom that you are. And then we have that rhythm and rit. We know the word rhythm comes from rit, art, ritual, fertility. It's the truth that can't be spoken. It's cosmological truth that goes through cycles, and it's not a flat circle, but it's not even a spiral because it's concentric. It's almost like a torus, right? Like the lemniscat, the infinity sign, built upon itself. It's like the outsides, the inside. I mean, that's embryology right there. So we start to see a larger kind of rhythm. And I mean, I'm getting electrified as I talk about it. And it's like the things get supercharged. So Ritambara is just it's a form of samadhi, which is described as being like the pregnant rain cloud. There's the bearing forth again.